Hello, everyone. Welcome to Balance's webinar. It is What I Wish You Knew, Relationships and Eating Disorders, 38 Ways to Navigate Them Better. My name is Taylor. I'm the lead intake coordinator here at Balance, and I will be the moderator for today. Just a little bit about Balance. We are an outpatient facility with levels of care ranging from PHP to individual nutrition counseling and things like that. So now that it looks like most people are here, we'll get started. So thank you for taking the time to log on today and learn more about this topic. Just by tuning in, you're putting the energy toward learning about yourself and getting support that you or someone you may know need. You're in the right place and you're definitely welcome here. We are absolutely happy to have you with us today. Like I had mentioned, if you have any sort of questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them into that Q&A. Some will be answered during presentation, some will be set aside. So please also feel free to share any thoughts and reactions in the chat. We will also be sharing any additional resources and information that's relevant to what's going on in that chat as well. So keep an eye out for that. And please don't be shy. We love hearing from you and would love for this to be an opportunity to connect as well as inform. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our presenter for today. This is Lauren Reddington, one of our program therapists here at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Balance webinar. Again, yes, my name is Lauren Reddington. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Master of Social Work, and I'm a program therapist here at Balance. I graduated with a degree in gender studies and psychology, and then I went on to get my master's in social work to do the work that I love to do. So I pretty much made a career out of helping folks recover from eating disorders. So I'm pretty passionate about it. I'm excited for this webinar, and I hope you learned something today. Okay, so just an overview on what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing how eating disorders can function similar to relationships. We'll get a little bit more into it as we go through the webinar, but you'll notice a common theme in how relationships function to support us, similar to relationships. Doesn't always have to be the best relationship, but certainly a relationship. Then we're going to talk about navigating relationships with others, whether you are the person who's presently suffering from an eating disorder or a loved one or a caretaker who's hoping to support their loved one in the best way. Furthermore, we're going to talk about how to talk about eating disorders, so just elaborating on that, and then some boundaries. Boundaries are so important to recovery and just life in general, and building relationships in a meaningful way. Then we're going to talk about how you can support your loved ones and what to do next. So how you might utilize Balance and our services to recover. Relationships and how to navigate them. So what is wrong? So sometimes our relationships get in the way of the eating disorder, right? Because the eating disorder wants to be the number one relationship in your life. Eating disorders create barriers and seep into every aspect of our lives, especially our relationships. The secrecy makes relationships with yourself, family, friends, and romantic partners harder to manage. And not talking about it does not make it go away. Recovery can help improve the quality of your relationships, and there are tools that can help in every phase. What's happening? How eating disorders affect communication. So it might not seem like something that's going to affect your communication, but like I said, when the eating disorder becomes a primary relationship, communication between other people in your life sometimes falls off. And it's also tricky to navigate. Saying the right thing and supporting your loved one can be challenging. So we're going to try and figure out some ways to do that. Eating disorders and how they create barriers. So eating disorders have an addictive quality. While we don't think of them necessarily as an addiction like alcohol or drugs, there's absolutely a chemical change that happens in the mind when we're engaging in behaviors that can be soothing or rewarding. And for that reason, we end up in a cycle similar to when one is stuck in addiction. You might know that what you're doing is not helpful, but still turning to it to cope. And that can be really challenging because cognitively, right, that you're not coping in an effective, adaptive way, but it's working for you, right? So if you're feeling better when you're using these behaviors, or feeling temporarily better, usually it can be alluring, just like addiction. So eating disorders provide a safe sense of control. If you don't have control over your life, your career, your relationship, eating disorders are a way to find some control in your life. Food is something that we learn to control pretty early in our lives, right? Whether it's our parents telling us to finish a plate before we get up from the table, or it's diet culture seeping into our minds and using that as an outlet for control. It is a very, very controlling disorder. And that's one of the hardest parts to break about it, like giving up that sense of control that it does give you. And the eating disorder can feel like a friend because it feels safe like that. But in reality, it's incredibly isolating, and communication with loved ones tends to fall through the cracks because the eating disorder thrives in secrecy. So if you have something that you really, really like and it's working for you, why would you want to talk about it, right? Your eating disorder can convince you that you don't have to talk about it, which couldn't be further from the truth. So obviously you don't have to talk about it, but it's essential to recovery, breaking down that black and white thinking and all of the lies that the eating disorder is telling you. Having someone who can challenge those thoughts or even just support you as you're going through them can make a big, big difference. Eating disorders and the needs they fill. So this is where we're going to talk about how the eating disorder can fill some gaps in relationships. So if we're feeling like someone isn't dependable, for example, we might turn to our eating disorder. If it's dependable, we can pull it out of our back pocket whenever we need it. So first comes safety. The eating disorder serves as a mechanism to protect from fear, from uncontrollable situations. If the world around you is feeling unmanageable or uncontrollable, you can turn to your eating disorder, right? It's something that goes with you wherever you go. It's not, you don't have to bring anything, just yourself and your thoughts. And it can be like a shelter. It can be a numbing property where you're able to kind of disassociate from what's going on around you and just feel that inner safety with yourself as you're controlling your body and your mind. Eating disorders also feel like a false friend or companion. They're always there with you, but they are truly isolating. We see relationships fall apart because your partner doesn't understand what you're going through. Maybe you're having mood swings. Maybe you are malnourished and not able to think straight, right? Your partner might be confused what's going on. If they're not aware of your eating disorder, they might perceive that distance or that disconnection as a problem within your relationship, right? And if they don't have the insight to let you know that they are there and an available resource for you, and they don't have the insight that the eating disorder is present, it can cause a lot of strain on relationships. Similarly, in friendships and in family relationships, it creates a sense of belonging. Isolation allows disordered thoughts to tell you won't be accepted by others unless you change. And having that in the back of your mind all the time, why would you want to go create new relationships, right? You have this trusted friend who comes with you wherever you go. You can use this friend in every situation. You can really rely on this friend. Why would you want to go seek out new, vulnerable, risky relationships that you don't have as much control over? It can be really scary. Just want to check and see if there's any questions. Okay. How to recognize and redirect. So when the eating disorder is coming into your mind, right? Say you're hanging out with a friend and you start feeling anxious, maybe socially anxious. This is something that comes up for a lot of folks, which I don't think it's talked about too much. There seems to be a little bit of a stigma around social anxiety and feeling othered in a room, but the eating disorder is that buddy that you have with you all the time. So say you're feeling socially anxious at a dinner or going to see a movie, right? You might go use that behavior the second that you notice that you're feeling anxious without really checking in to see what you're feeling. So first you're going to want to identify your emotional needs. Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling anxious, sad, angry, happy? Believe it or not, happiness is absolutely a trigger for some, right? It's like, wow, this really exciting feeling. Maybe I don't deserve that. Or I'm afraid I'm going to lose that if I gain weight or if I engage in behaviors or if I tell someone about what's going on, right? I might have that threatened and I don't want that threatened. So leaning back into the disorder. So first you're going to check in on your emotional state. Stopping to check in on your emotional state can be the most challenging part. There's a mechanism called HALT, stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The technique to utilize when you are checking in on your feelings. When you start feeling like using a behavior or lashing out or something like that, ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And usually there's something going on there. So once you're able to identify that emotional need, you can reach out for help. You can reach out for the support. So there's some things you can do on your own, journaling, meditating, breathing techniques, or you can call a friend, you can call a team member. You are in programming, certainly a therapist or have an outpatient therapist, reaching out to them. We do have, actually, let me add this, okay. Add to your action plan. So add the feeling and coping technique to your action plan, share with others so they can support you when you need them. So at Balance, we offer a DBT support group. This is part of our PHP programming, and it really the goal of DBT is to be able to tolerate these distressing feelings. So if you are feeling anxious or sad, but what we work on in DBT at first is really just tuning into our emotions and recognizing them and figuring out if we're able to tolerate them and what to do with them. But it's a great group and it's skills based. So it's things that you can apply in your day-to-day life. Self-talk, and how we talk about ourselves. So the inner dialogue is different. Some people don't really tune into their inner dialogue or pay too much attention, but you check in on it and notice what the thoughts are coming in and out of your mind on a day-to-day basis, and you become aware of them, you might notice that they're not very nice sometimes. Would you talk to your best friend that way? The answer is usually no. We hear that a lot in programming. An example being like, I'm so far behind, I can't recover, right? Would you say that to the other person in the room who's trying to recover right now? Probably not. So if you're able to notice the thought, observe it, and then decide, does this serve me? Is this making me feel better? Is this motivating me? Or it might just be my eating disorder talking, right? Again, the eating disorder being a very controlling, powerful relationship that we have. So it wants to stay. It wants to stay. And battling that internal dialogue is a big part of recovery. So as you're noticing these thoughts, you might not be able to rid yourself of them. Often when we try to distance ourselves immediately from intrusive thoughts or negative thoughts, they talk louder. So some things that you can do instead is to find some ways to show yourself some compassion or distract yourself. Distraction's a big DBT technique that we use in programming. But some ways to show yourself compassion are nourishment, checking in on your needs, doing things you enjoy, creating a self-care routine with calming practices. You might use yoga or meditation. We do have yoga and PHP programming actually as well. And we talk a lot about mindfulness, meditation, and thought observation as well in DBT group. It's offered twice a week in PHP. Relationships with others. So this is where it gets tricky, right? Our loved ones usually really want to support us, but they might not understand. Number one, they might not know. That is one of the most common issues in recovering is my loved ones don't know, my friends don't know, right? So they're saying things left and right that are triggering me. They are enabling my behaviors. Maybe there's a fine line, and it can be really tricky and can feel really, really vulnerable to share with someone. So I completely understand that, but it is a vital part of recovery. Getting out of that isolation and the secrecy that the eating disorder thrives in can be really liberating. So these are some things that folks who are struggling with eating disorders often wish their supporters knew. Eating disorders are not only about appearance. So that is one of the most biggest misconceptions, that eating disorders are often rooted in vanity or a desire to be thin, a desire to look a certain way. And that's usually not the case. Sometimes eating disorders start from a place of trying to control weight, but usually they are an emotional disorder, a mood disorder, where you're trying to regulate all of your feelings all the time. And it starts to have pretty minimal connections to weight, though it feels that way. So folks might say, "Ugh, I'm concerned that I'm going to come into program and I am going to gain weight. What am I going to do with that? I can't do that. I can't do that." Well, why can't you, right? What is the fear that comes with gaining weight? We talk a lot about fat phobia in programming because this comes up a lot. Our society has a propensity towards promoting thinness and diet culture, and for that reason, I think there is that contributes to the misconception around eating disorders being about appearance. So it's important to know and incorporate that knowledge into supporting a loved one, into your recovery, to recognize that it's more than just how you look in the mirror. Because, hey, sometimes you think, well, if I look like this, I'll feel better. Usually that's not the case. Usually you get there and you still feel some of the similar feelings and then have a next goal, right? There's always something better. Because usually it's really about what you're feeling inside. Eating disorders are not all the same and they do not look alike. So, some common eating disorders: anorexia, bulimia, OSFED, ARFID. These all look very different. They have different symptoms. They have different presentations. I think there is a huge, huge problem in our society where we think of eating disorders, or folks in general think of eating disorders, and they think of a small body, right? That excludes so many people from the conversation. There is no look to any one type of eating disorder. And it's certainly not a blanket thinness. And I think that's a common misconception. And folks really struggle with that, feeling like, I don't look sick enough, I'm not sick enough. And it's a really tricky feeling. It makes a lot of sense in the society that we live in, but letting your loved ones know, hey, you might have an understanding, or you might think my eating disorder is going to look one type of way, but at the end of the day, it looks a little different, right? Eating disorders thrive in secrecy. I'm likely hiding this from you. That's a pretty common experience in treatment, right? Hiding things from your therapist, hiding things from your loved ones, hiding things from your partner, your family, your friends. Why? Why are we doing that again? Well, we don't want to let go of the eating disorder, right? If we tell someone, they might try and take it. Eating disorders are a very, like I said, very isolating and very individual disorder, right? So there's repercussions that impact the lives of everyone not everyone, but a lot of folks in the lives of folks who suffer from eating disorders. But I think there's like a misconception that it is very individual, like that it's not going to affect anyone else. That's kind of how it feels, right? It's not going to affect anyone else. So if I just keep it secret, no one's going to be hurt by it. When in reality, that's not the case. Whether or not they know about what you're going through, it doesn't, that makes a big difference, right? If they're going to be able to support you or not. Recovery takes time. Recovery takes time. I like to reframe this for folks. How long did it take you to establish all these habits? How long have you been hearing messaging from diet culture? How long have you been body shaming yourself? How long have you been trying to control everything in your life, right? That probably took a long time, right? That took a lot of different life experiences, a lot of different challenges, a lot of different outcomes. And for that reason, it takes time to recover as well, right? Different experiences, learning, practicing. Sometimes folks will be like, well, I already talked about this, right? Okay, how many times did you talk about the diet you might be on? Are you willing to talk about anti-diet approaches for that long, right? It takes some reprogramming of the mind. It really does. And recovery is not linear. So sometimes you might take a couple steps forward and a couple steps back, and that is absolutely okay. It does not take away from your progress, and it's not an expectation that there isn't going to be a relapse, right? There might be a relapse. Does that take away everything you've learned? No. Maybe you had a particularly challenging moment. Maybe you'll learn something from the relapse, right? Relapse is pretty much a part of recovery, and at Balance, we absolutely recognize that. And that's why we have various levels of care. So we have the PHP programming, which is an in-person day programming. And then we have IOP, which is a step down level. We have daytime IOP and evening IOP. And then we have outpatient groups. So say you're like, I've recovered from an eating disorder, but I'm still struggling with, I need more support. Perfect. We have outpatient groups. We have body image. We have food and mood. We are offering a men's group. And I believe, will soon be opening an LGBTQ group. Feel free to reach out about that and get more information. But the support is so important. So we want to make sure that there's a space for everyone, right? You can be at this level, you could be at this level, or you can move around, right? Say you sign up for IOP and you realize, you know what, I could use some more support. We can try and bump you up to PHP, and we're pretty flexible around that, right? We don't always know when we first come in exactly how we're going to do. So that's why we offer various levels of programming as well as the outpatient supports. More of what I wish you knew. So eating disorders are not a choice, right? Are you able to just stop it? No, right? Did you wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to struggle with this eating disorder for the next several years? Probably not, right? And it's important for loved ones to recognize that. If it was as easy as just eating or being like, okay, I don't want to have this anymore, a lot of people will probably go with that, right? They don't want to be miserable. They don't want to be suffering in isolation. And that can be a common misconception because some folks don't struggle with food or body, right? So they're like, I just eat this meal. Why just eat it? Just eat it. Not helpful. Not helpful. It can seem obvious, but it's a pretty common misconception. Like, hey, this seems like an external thing that you could probably just fix, when in reality, it's not that simple. Can't fix it for me. That's another one, right? The clinicians can't fix it. The loved ones can't fix it. The doctors can't fix it. The client or the person who's dealing with the eating disorder is going to be the one to create the change, right? We can provide support, knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a level of motivation from the person. It's going to be willingness, and it's going to, like, that desire to change is just incredibly important, and it's not always there, and that's okay. That's okay. We'll work with you. Be patient. Please be patient. Be Patient. Imagine, I like to reframe this for loved ones this way. Imagine that every time you looked in the mirror, you felt really, really bad. Can you give me some love? Can you give me some patience? I'm feeling so bad all the time, every day. I have to eat every day, right? That's something that's interesting about eating disorders, right? If we think about alcoholism or drug addiction, you don't have to drink alcohol, right? In recovery, you can be sober. And while it's absolutely challenging, your body does not require alcohol to live, nor does it require drugs, right? Your body requires food. And that's really hard. You're facing your biggest fear every single day, right? So we require a lot of patience, and we have a lot of patience here too at Balance. The eating disorder is no one's fault. Sometimes folks can feel like they gave their partner an eating disorder by making a comment about their body, or parents, right? I controlled your food growing up, so I gave you the eating disorder, right? That's not how it works. You can't give someone a disorder. You can hold yourself accountable for some of the things that you did that were problematic. You can change your behaviors. But at the end of the day, an eating disorder has genetic component, environmental component, social component, and then the emotional component. So there's really a lot going on, and to assume that it's your fault would honestly be pretty audacious, right? There's a lot going on here. How powerful are you? That's what I like to say to folks. How powerful are you? But there's a lot. There's a lot of different parts that make up an eating disorder and lead to it becoming a problem. Obviously, it's a problem. Lead to it becoming a disorder, rather. And there are ways you can support me, which we're going to jump into next. I do want to check on the question. Are there any Black or BIPOC only groups? I don't believe we're offering any right now, but it's absolutely something that we have been talking about. So hopefully we can keep you in the loop on that. Check our website frequently. But there's definitely a need for that, and we're working towards it. How to talk about it. It's time. Eating disorders thrive in secrecy, like we said, and they create some shame, causing walls to go up. So sometimes the second someone tries to challenge it, we get a little bit more protective. Get protective over it, right? Or like a friend. This person, right? It's not a person. This person's been supporting me for years. No one was here for me. No one knew I was struggling. My eating disorder did, right? So it's like, please don't come for the thing that keeps me safe, makes me feel protected, helps me regulate my emotions. It makes a lot of sense, but being open about your needs allows others to understand and help you and pull you out of that isolation. Feel less alone. What to remember. So I mentioned a little bit of this. Eating disorders can have genetic ties, but they also are learned behaviors. Narratives allow eating disorders to take over. No one person or thing is to blame. Allow your loved ones to tell you what they want and need. We cannot move someone to action without their willingness. Removing the safety net of the eating disorder feels scary and can cause a defensive reaction. Seeing it from the outside is painful too. Being worried can cause pushing. So if you're say you're trying to support your loved one who just is close to you that they have an eating disorder, and they get really defensive, why do you think that might be? Well, probably because you're coming for their beloved. I'm going to answer this question 1 minute. So it makes sense. There is quite often defensive reactions, right? This is something that we deal with. This is something that we learn to regulate in DBT group. It's protective. It's protective, right? Say you had a shield that protected you from feeling bad feelings. And anytime someone came with you with a negative comment, boop, hit the shield, bounced off. Would you want to give that shield up? Probably not. And that's a lot of the function of an eating disorder, is that numbing of emotion. It is regulating what you can't regulate. Emotional regulation is really, really hard. And it's something we're not taught growing up. but we are taught how to finish our plates or not eat, right? Diet. And that becomes an associated control mechanism. And it's really hard to break that. What about groups for athletes in recovery? We don't have a group for that, but what I can say is we do have many, many folks who are athletes, dancers, and have used their body in like a strength-based way. So there's a lot of group support there and understanding there. We're absolutely knowledgeable on it, but there isn't a specific group right now. But we can add that to the list of potential groups. That's a great idea. Asking for help. So here's some examples of ways you might try asking for help in specific ways. So when we say like, I need support, what does that look like? Folks can feel like really caught off guard. Oh my gosh, I want to support this person, but I don't know how. The best way to receive that support is to give some specific ways the person can support you. So can you call me around meal times? Maybe can you eat the meal with me, right? Having someone there to discuss, have some distraction, or even just seeing someone eat it normally, right? That can have a calming effect, and it can also be supporting or supportive. Can you help me find treatment? Pretty specific, right? Maybe you know your loved one, or maybe you don't even want your loved one to support you, right? You don't need to. It might be helpful, but maybe you just want help finding treatment and want to lean into your treatment team. That's okay. Can you help me find treatment? Do you want to watch this webinar? Can I send you this webinar? And then for loved ones, you can ask, how can I support you? What can I do? Right? What can I do? Can I make sure you are distracted after dinner? Can I make sure you laugh during breakfast so you're feeling some joy while you're experiencing a lot of struggle? Very simple things. It can be very simple. And these things go a long way. Can you let me know you're proud of me? Or can I let you know I'm proud of you? Right? Might seem counterintuitive, like I'm just being really, really specific, but that's usually what helps. And it's sometimes really hard to identify what you need, and we practice that as well. And then all us, can you send me that webinar? Or will you spend some time with me? That's a great one. All of these things we discuss in our family group. So we do offer a family group in PHP programming. You are welcome to bring, so this is family being like chosen family. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your nuclear family unit. You might not have a relationship with your parents or siblings or whatever. You can bring parents, siblings, cousins, friends, your therapist. You can bring your therapist, right? You can bring your partner. And it's partially psychoeducation based. So it's teaching folks how they can be supportive. It's discussing some of the challenging topics and then having a discussion. We're answering questions. We are creating dialogue between the supporter and the person who needs to be supported. And it can be really, really awesome to see similarities in your dynamic with your loved ones and other folks in group. Can be validating, I think.
Hi, Lauren, we have a question here. Asking about the ED mind. This individual has heard her team use the ED mind, and she's wondering if the mind or the brain for someone with an eating disorder is really fundamentally different from someone from a non-eating disorder. She doesn't know what you mean by the eating disorder mind.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I guess I don't understand what it means. Yes, okay. It isn't literally two brains working against each other. But the brain, like I said earlier, like the addictive component is absolutely a change in the brain chemicals. I'm not sure what behaviors you engage in, but there are certain behaviors that create like an immediate change in the brain chemicals that signal endorphins or like a good feeling or a feeling of relief. When we say ED mind, we don't necessarily mean like clinically or physiologically your mind has changed, although it absolutely has. But I mean, in the same way that in the same way that our minds change from watching a lot of violent television, kind of like that, you know, like the way that your brain functions and sorts through information and responds changes. And I'm not sure how long you've been in your disorder or been struggling, but it starts to your eating disorder mind, which maybe used to be just like a little voice in your head saying like, oh, don't do that. But if you are really enmeshed in your eating disorder, that voice can overpower your internal dialogue, which we call the wise mind. So the mind that is able to make maybe rational, logical decisions, the brain that is able to fact check. I think of the eating disorder mind as a little bit more animalistic or like evolutionary, right? So it thinks it's responding to a threat. So you're triggered. Say something happens, you're triggered. And there is an automatic process that happens when you suffer from an eating disorder, right? So your brain doesn't really say, like in the former side where I was talking about halt and hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that emotional check does not come into play quite often when you are suffering with an eating disorder. It's thought, automatic behavior. So thought, eating disorder behavior, as opposed to thought, thinking about the thought, right? Considering the thought, fact checking the thought, right? I ate something, my body's going to immediately increase in size. Do you even have that cognitive thought? Okay, now I'm going to use the behavior? Probably not. It probably just happens pretty naturally. So something that because your brain is just in the process, it's a cycle, it's automatic. You aren't thinking about it very much, leaning into that kind of addiction like component of eating disorders. So to answer your question, we do use that terminology a lot, the eating disorder mind. It's encouraging folks to separate the two parts of themselves because our eating disorders can become a big part of our identities. And we lose insight into our problem solving mind, into our emotional regulation, into like inquisitiveness, right? What am I feeling? Just like, I'm feeling bad, so I'm going to use the behavior, right? So the wise mind asks questions like, is that a fact? Or am I responding to what's really going on here? Or am I responding to a past trauma? Am I responding to fear? Am I responding to a story I created in my head, right? So it's slowing down those intrusive thoughts, those automatic processes, and engaging with the part of your mind and building the part of your mind that challenges those thoughts. So your eating disorder mind might say, I am going to restrict so that I look good at this wedding. Your wise mind might say back, I'm not going to be able to enjoy the wedding. I'm not going to be able to dance. I'm not going to be able to laugh. I'm going to be malnourished, right? I'm not going to be able to be present and enjoy the wedding if I restrict. And building that internal dialogue is tough and it takes time. And sometimes it starts with coming to programming and having someone be that wise mind for you, right? To challenge those thoughts. So in the beginning of programming, like when folks start out in PHP, for example, week 1, I'm not challenging too many thoughts, right? It's usually I might be pointing out their intrusive thought or the disordered thought, and then they are invited to try to respond to it, but they might not even know what to say. And so part of therapy then is teaching folks how to respond, what to check in on, and use some of those DBT skills before responding to that automatic thought. Does that make sense? I'm happy to elaborate if at the end, if not.
She says, thank you. That makes a lot more sense.
Great. And yes, if you come into any of Balance's groups, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about that. I think it's a really positive reframe because it takes away, like the eating disorder is no longer identity, right? There's more to you than that eating disorder. There's other parts of you and they have power too. what not to say to me. This is my favorite slide. What not to say. I mean, there's so many harmless comments that loved ones, supporters, friends, even just like folks you might hear in a store. Like you might be trying some clothes on at Target and you might hear someone say something like this and this might trigger you. What not to say? I'm so full. I feel gross. Should you be eating that? Policing. Where did all the food go? Just get over it and eat. I feel fat. You aren't fat. You're beautiful. I wish I had your willpower. Do you know how hard your eating disorder is for me? So to take some of these apart, fat is not a feeling. That is not a feeling. That's something that we work on a lot. It's informed by fat phobia, right? Thinking that one, fat is a feeling. Two, fat is something negative, right? So usually when folks are saying I feel fat, they're not feeling great, right? It's a negative statement. That can be really, really damaging to hear, right? You're telling me, oh, okay, I'm supposed to trust my body, love my body, allow it to find its set point weight, allow it to find where it feels best and thrives. And then you're telling me you feel fat. Like, oh, great, I'm going to feel fat too, or whatever, right? And that still has that fat phobia. And that's something we talk about a lot. And I think it's a really important conversation. Our program is based in an anti-diet approach. So no diets. Talk a lot about how damaging diets can be, nutritionism and healthism, and like wellness culture. And we are also health at every size. So you can be healthy in a larger body. You can have a fat body and you can be healthy. You can have a fat body and you cannot be healthy. You can have a skinny body and you cannot be healthy. You can have a body of any size and be healthy or not healthy, right? And that's okay. And that does not change your value as a person. We are not going to judge you for it. You are still worthy of recovery. And you are absolutely allowed to show up in whatever body you're in. The next one that I want to touch on is you aren't fat, you're beautiful. That's a really, really common one that comes up. You aren't fat, right? You aren't fat followed by a compliment. So does that mean that me being fat is an insult? That's probably implied, right? Fat is very beautiful, right? Like, why do we think that fat can't be beautiful? Why do we need to clarify? Hey, you aren't fat, but you're beautiful. Like, it's very, very, very damaging. And it's a common response when folks are going through eating disorders. They might be doing some weight restoration, and they might say, I feel fat, right? And then instead of challenging that thought, the supporter says, you aren't fat, you're beautiful. Oh no. So then they'll think, well, what happens if I get fat? Then I'm not beautiful. Does that make sense? Language is really, really, really important. And I think it's important in all parts of our lives. And we don't realize the impact of our words all the time. Wish I had your willpower, common one as well. And you know how hard your eating disorder is for me. I think it's okay to express the pain that you might be experiencing as someone is struggling with an eating disorder, but it can minimize what they're going through to approach it like this. Do you know how hard your eating disorder is for me? They probably have some insight, right? Because they're the ones going through the eating disorder. You might say it in a different way, like, I'm struggling, supporting you. Or do you know of any resources where I can find help? That's important, right? Supporters getting support from someone other than the person suffering. What to say instead? What can I do to support you? Do you want to talk to me about your recovery? Do you want me to listen, or do you want advice? You're a good friend. I admire your strength. Is there anything I do or say that isn't supportive? That's a great one to ask, right? As opposed to just asking what is supportive, because they might not feel comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, when you make these comments, when you talk about how you've had salad for every meal this week, right? It really upsets me because I know that that's disordered, but you're doing it. So it's confusing me, right? It's disordered when I do it. So when you do it, I don't know, it's kind of tempting. It seems like I might be able to do it. So things like that. You mean so much to me. I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. It's a really, really important one that folks need to hear. Boundaries and why we need them. Without boundaries, your needs are ignored and you don't feel supported. When you clearly communicate what you need, your loved ones become aware of what's helpful. It's helpful to be consistent in restating your boundaries, and boundaries are not always respected, and your boundaries may change. So, big problem with boundaries is someone might say, I told my mom to not talk to me about her diet, right? Mom then talks to her about her diet. Then she's like, she didn't listen. She did not listen, right? Did you set a clear boundary? So did the boundary say, if you talk about your diet, I'm going to leave the conversation? Or did you just say, don't talk about your diet? Right? It's really helpful to make a clear boundary of what's going to happen, right? If you keep body checking in front of me, I'm not going to be able to spend time with you. And what you do, right, is you might point it out 1 or 2 times, or you might just skip right to drawing the boundary, right? They do it, then you don't spend any more time with them, right? And then they're seeing the consequence. You are holding that boundary. Sometimes we get a little too flexible with our boundaries, which sometimes can be good, but a lot of the times can cause confusion for the other person. They'll be like, well, I did this last time, you didn't care, right? So staying consistent, restating them if it seems like someone's confused, and also validating yourself, because I think boundaries can be tricky, right? We don't want to tell someone they don't want to hear. We want people to probably feel decent having a conversation with us, right? So if we're saying to them, if you do this, I'm not going to spend time with you, they're probably going to not like that, right? They might say things like, well, that's extreme, that's ridiculous, like you're being a jerk. No, you are protecting yourself, and that's okay. They're welcome to change that behavior and then spend time with you. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. You can also, here we go. We're going to talk about unhealthy boundaries. That's what I was going to touch on. Doing things for others you assume will make them happy is an example of an unhealthy boundary. Maybe pushing yourself. Maybe you're feeling really emotionally exhausted after a long day of doing your best, and you have plans that night and you don't want to cancel them. So you show up, you're not present, you go home, you're exhausted, and then you might use behaviors. You're not listening to your body, right? That might be triggering. Or it might just be upsetting to go to that space, and you're also not going to probably be present and show up. So doing things for others that you assume will make them happy usually leaves both parties feeling a little less happy than we hope. Allowing others to make decisions for you. We really want to focus on allowing the person that is struggling to have some autonomy, to be able to make some decisions for themselves while they are in treatment. I know that's not always possible, right? There's different levels of acuity and how folks are suffering, what level they're suffering. They might need more decision-making help. However, it is empowering for them to practice making those decisions and knowing that they can do it, right? That they're in control and they're not being forced to recover, because that's something that comes up. Keeping feelings hidden all the time, so not sharing your feelings, and then they all come out all at once, right? Saying yes to plans or favors you don't have the bandwidth for, allowing others' opinions of you to become your own opinions of yourself. Those are some unhealthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Asking and sharing trigger topics, words, and places. I missed a question, didn't I?
Yeah, from the last slide. Can you speak to how healthy boundaries might look different based on culture? It's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Healthy boundaries definitely, I mean, they vary from family to family, but absolutely by culture, right? So in some cultures, families are expected to share a ton, right? It's like you're together all the time, pretty enmeshed. That drawing a boundary that says, I'm not going to come to dinner might not be an acceptable practice. So you might want to, I mean, the fact is that you can still draw the boundary, but it's a matter of whether or not you want to, right? So addressing what the importance of like not letting your family down and cultivating that relationship and holding the importance of your culture while also prioritizing your recovery. So it can be tricky. And that's also a conversation you might have, right? That opens up the room for more of a conversation, right? So say having big meals is a part of your culture, and there's a lot of conversation about how we're eating so much and how everyone's full and blah, blah, blah. Like, you might share, I love our family togetherness. I love our meals, but what I'm struggling with is blank. There's certainly ways to adapt things, but it can absolutely be a challenge. And there's totally varying boundaries between families. I mean, cultural level, on class level, on all different levels. So it's absolutely super unique to each person. But that's also something that can absolutely be explored and navigated in treatment, in therapy, in individual case management. We do family sessions too. I did want to mention that at some point. We do family sessions where you can bring in, again, your family and discuss things like that. Because I don't have all the answers, right? I'm not going to lie and say I know the specific approach to each culture and how to navigate it, but it's the openness, right? It's having openness to change. It's having openness to flexibility. Flexibility is a big thing. And also incorporating your values, right? So again, recovery is going to look different for everyone. Let me know if there's more on that. Healthy boundaries. So asking and sharing trigger topics, words, and places. So that's a great example, right? So while we are having our family dinner on Sunday, people are often making comments on the sizes of the portions. I'd love to come to family dinner. However, can we not talk about portions? Right? Asking what someone likes to hear, not what we think they want. Being flexible. So for an example of asking what someone likes to hear, I just want to time check myself. How many slides do I have left?
So just one more comment, it looks like, on boundaries. It's the situation of wanting to avoid a situation because of the fear of the food, and then feeling isolated because you're not there, and then that takes the risk of not being invited the next time. So you could speak to that.
I'm just going to read it again. So no.
Sure.
Situation. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I just want to make sure I answer it fully. Okay. So transparency with your friends. I know that's not always an option. Like, not everyone feels comfortable sharing about their experience, and that's totally fine. You can share with who you're comfortable with. I think knowing that it's not going to be forever can be really helpful. So just because you're not going to attend one event because you're struggling does not mean that you're never going to attend an event with food again. It doesn't mean that you've suddenly become unfun. And I challenge some of that black and white thinking going on there, right? If I don't go, then I'm not fun. How does you not going just change your fun level, right? Are you instead focusing on taking care of yourself so that you can show up more fully in the future? How to have this conversation with friends without disclosing your disorder. You might say, I'm not feeling up to it, right? I think we owe a lot of people explanations when in reality we don't. And then you might let them know when you are up to it, like, hey, we haven't gone out to eat for a while. Navigating food and like meals and going out and things like that is absolutely something we talk about a lot because it is really tricky. Sometimes you might want to use it as a challenge. Sometimes folks find it helpful to practice eating in a social setting and having that support or distraction of their friends can be really helpful. Sometimes it's not. So again, it's going to vary on a person-to-person basis. But what I would encourage is like as much open communication as you can, and to also, when you're having those thoughts like, oh no, I'm the not fun friend, I totally get it, that where is that coming from? Did someone tell you you weren't the fun friend, or is that your inner dialogue saying that? What makes a fun friend? What makes a good friend, right? Does it mean that you have to show up to every event? Is that a healthy boundary for yourself? Probably not. You know, asking yourself some questions and then considering how much you're open to sharing. I hope that was helpful. Some more healthy boundaries. Like, oh, perfect. Again, being flexible. I can't make it this weekend. Let's reschedule. It's a great option. Allowing for space and asking for it, telling people what you need, being open and honest. I struggle with knowing the right way to react or say, or what to say around you, but I want to learn how. That's a great way of, I guess, asking how to respect someone's boundaries. Physical boundaries. So physical boundaries are something that might seem like they'd be a little bit more obvious than emotional boundaries with eating disorders, but sometimes they're not. So whether it's like in an intimate relationship, like a sexual relationship, or if it's just a friendship, or your loved ones who might hug you, or if you go dancing or something and someone wants to put their hand on your hip and you don't feel comfortable with that, telling your loved ones like, hey, I'm feeling a little unsafe in my body lately because I'm not using my behaviors, or because I am and I'm challenging them and they're my safety blanket, or period, I'm not feeling safe in my body, I'd rather not be touched. Encouraging loved ones to ask before they touch, right? Can I give you a hug? This should be common practice, right? This should go without saying. We should all be having clear discussions around physical wants and needs, but unfortunately it's not happening all the time, and it can be really triggering. So making sure that you check in with your loved ones who are struggling and your loved ones who aren't struggling about their physical boundaries is important. What can I do for the support system? You can go to a group support. You can receive professional supports. You can see a therapist. You might start going to a group support for folks struggling. You might join a forum with other folks struggling to support their loved ones. You might learn some new coping mechanisms and anxieties. You might educate yourself. So we're going to include some resources at the end here. I think there's a lot of helpful links and things like that. I also wanted to plug here that there's a lot of podcasts on eating disorders. To my knowledge, there's not many specifically made for folks trying to support people with eating disorders, but it can give you a lot of insight if you want to listen yourself. But a very, very, very important thing that you don't have to sign up for a group or do anything for is just be intentional with your words. It's really easy and a supportive thing to do for your loved one. And then for the person struggling with the eating disorder, find a separate outlet for support outside of your loved ones. So sometimes if you are only, say your partner, say you live with your partner, and you're only going to them with your struggles, that might cause some strain on your relationship, right? Same thing if you were going to someone with your work struggles every day, right? It's like there are other components of life, and they might feel like they're unable to support you, or it's putting a strain on your relationship. That does not mean that your loved one should not support you or be supportive. It means you might need additional support. Educating yourself, learning like the intellectual piece around eating disorders can be really healing. The cycle, how it develops, all of these socioeconomic components of it, all about diet culture, all of these things can be really empowering to learn, and can also create a little bit of anger towards the things that led to the disorder, like diet culture, things like that. And that can be powerful. You can ask for support without, oopsies, you just flipped to the next one. You can ask for support without policing and be intentional with your words. You could go to the next one. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's some resources we have here. I Want This to Work by Elizabeth Earnshaw is a great book for folks trying to support. There's our Instagram. Online for parents. This also, you can totally check it out if you're not a parent. NETA has a parent toolkit. We have our balance support groups. There's another book up there. And then, so we have our support groups. We have PHP, IOP, outpatient, like I said. We have individual nutrition. We have individual case management. And I wanted to extend this to all of you. We do offer a confidential discovery call. So this is, you can check out our website and find the number is there to give us a call. If you have any questions about what we do offer, this isn't a call with a therapist. This is a call to gain more information about balance. You might ask some personal questions, how you fit into the scheme of it all. And we'll be there to help.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was awesome. So I don't see any questions right now circulating. If you do have any last minute questions, feel free to pop them in. We are at the top of the hour, so I just want to be cognizant of that time. But thank you everyone so much for stopping by. We're so honored that you chose to spend this time with us, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar as much as we did. If you would like to continue learning about recovery, eating disorders, or treatment, there are lots of opportunities to get in touch with us. In the chat, you'll see I just added in some resources and links and the link to the discovery call. Like Lauren was saying, we have different levels of treatment, and I did see that in the chat, some people are asking about some BIPOC specific and athlete groups. So we're constantly thinking about new groups here at Balance, and we can definitely bring those two groups into the discussion of, what that would look like for us here at Balance and starting to open something like that up. But one of the special things about Balance is that we do individualize our care a lot. So we have groups that are able to be adapted to any topic that the clients are really wanting to talk about. So, we can do that pretty quickly within our programs. But yeah, we'll definitely bring those groups up in the conversations that we have with our team. And please feel free to check out our webinars that's located on our YouTube. And please feel free to contact us and schedule a discovery call. And we hope to see you again soon.
I do see one more question.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Thoughts on medication? I think medication can be wonderful. Absolutely can be wonderful. Can be really helpful for some folks. Might not be helpful for everyone. It's definitely a person-to-person thing, but I do definitely believe that medication can be really helpful in recovery for some people, but it's not a requirement, I would say. And we do have a psychiatrist as well at Balance.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Lauren. And like I said, please feel free to check out our YouTube. Look out for our emails. We announce some really great things in there. And yeah, we will see you guys next time.